side.
Good evening, everyone. For round number 2 of this evening's events, we had interviews at 6:45, and now we're going to have a public hearing in regards to the creation of a municipal service district. Mr. Hewitt's going to give us some background and information, and following Mr. Hewitt, we will have an opportunity for you, the public, to speak at the public hearing. And Mr. Hewitt will now lead us in the learning of how this thing works and what it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As lead into the night's presentation, I'd like to introduce Scott Leo. He's the bond counsel, Parker Code out of Charlotte, and will serve as our repository of expertise concerning that. Tonight's presentation for you, I'm going to cover 4 areas, give you a little bit of background on the Central Reach project, discuss some of the financing and budgetary considerations, go into some of the details on the municipal service district itself, and show you a map. The Central Reach project, of course, represents the town's largest leach field project ever. It is one of the 3 legs on our beach management plan stool, an integral component thereof, is locally sponsored, and we have all our permits in hand for offshore sand. And offshore sand is a critical piece of our permits. The project itself is composed of about 1.3 million cubic yards, stretching 4 miles from about 240 Ocean Boulevard East all the way down to 781 Ocean Boulevard West. And, the design template should advance the shoreline 60 to 80 feet south or seaward, and dredging is permitted to occur from November to April, which is the turtle, primarily the turtle nesting, not the turtle nesting season. I got that right, didn't I, Tony? We don't nest in the winter time.
No.
Financing is a combination of special obligation bonds, state distributed revenues, town fees, and pay-go. Primarily, the collateral, that the interlocal agreement that the county has made with the town will provide the backstop collateral. And for the MSD, along with the financing, the local government commission will have to approve the bond issuance. Actual funding of the $15 million program is proposed or budgeted, really, because we've already adopted the budget. $3 million from escrowed BPART funds, pay-go. $500,000, it's really $449,000 of FEMA Irene money that we've been trying to work into our program, and then $11.5 million in special obligation bond funding. Municipal Service District is a special taxing district. I want to repeat that so everybody hears it. The Municipal Service District is a special taxing district. It is established for special purposes. In our case, it's for beach erosion and flood and hurricane protection works. Surprisingly, that is the #1 reason listed in the law that you can establish municipal service districts. And it is prescribed for the issuance of special obligation bonds. The standards that we have to comply with for the establishment of a municipal service district have to adopt an ordinance that defines the district, and finding has to be made that the beach erosion, flood, and hurricane protection works are needed to an extent this is the first one, and the Board of Commissioners has to approve by majority at each meeting. They got to have 2 meetings, it has to be approved at at both of them. The report also has to be published. That went out to all of the real property owners in the proposed district and filed with the clerk in accordance with the general statute. It contains a proposed boundary map. There is a statement of sufficiency and the plan contained within that report for the beach erosion, flood, and hurricane protection works. What does the district itself look like? This is the eastern half of the district, which is terminates at approximately 240 Ocean Boulevard East, and extends down to 781 Ocean Boulevard West. And I made the font a little larger on this slide than the last time you guys saw it. There are several things that aren't even on here. One, the interlocal agreement that we coordinated with the county, or got approved with the county. Tonight's meeting, of course, and the establishment of the municipal service district, showing that some of the administrative tasks that are ongoing through the rest of August and September will be coordinating the financing with the banks or lending institutions that are in the business of providing funding for the beach nourishment project. That's a real short list, by the way. And with the goal toward getting our application complete for the local government commission's review beginning of September, and a meeting with the local government commission subsequently on the 4th of October, where they will up or down on our application. Then closing after that meeting, and then of course construction beginning on 15 November. That's the plan. Finally, I'd like to reiterate that establishing a municipal service district is a requirement of special obligations bond funding. Without the district, we cannot have, or we cannot acquire special obligations bond funding. This is the first of 2 required public meetings, and it is part of the process that we have to go through in order to meet the requirements for project construction. That's the end of my presentation for the municipal service district.
Okay, before I open the floor for for questions, Mr. Hewitt, will you take questions from the floor? We might be able to save a lot of people from having to run up to the. Any
Sure.
questions?
And anything I can't answer, I'm sure that we'll be able to battle on.
Yes, sir.
Yes, would you explain the term AGO?
You've got the money in hand, you're
Paying as you go.
from escrow funds. And in this case, the $3 million is coming from the B Park fund balance.
And that would be on a
One-time basis.
one-time thing? At the start, on a,
At the start.
Ms. Jordan?
I have several questions actually about the bonds and the.
Most attorneys do.
My understanding is the MSD allows the board to assess a special tax against the properties within that MSD. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
But this board has said, at least for this year, that it's not going to do that because it approved the budget where the funds came.
Correct.
But that doesn't control future boards. And so in the future, the special tax rate could be assessed against any property or all properties within the MSD. Is
proposed at 10 years.
So anytime within the next 10 years, a board, and I'm assuming it might be different than those of you here, might vote to assess a special tax, a higher tax rate against the properties in that MSD, right?
You're looking at me, I'm scared to answer, but in my opinion, yes.
I'll answer it. It's subject to the annual budget appropriation.
So at any time within the next, can that be extended? Can the 10 years, can the bonds be extended?
The bonds will have a term of 10 years, it only extended if the town falls. I mean, they'll be paid off, they'll be earned past in 10 years.
Okay, all right, but any time within that 10 years.
Could I make,
Why- Go ahead.
could I make a, I have a question similar to that. Well, I'll make it as a statement. It's my understanding that a board could assess a special tax by virtue of its own authority anyway. Is that correct?
Well, you could, I mean, you have the authority by the process that you're undertaking now to create a municipal service district for purposes of providing services to the greater extent than the town in general needs. So if there were another part of the town that needed services or wanted services to a greater extent, you could do a municipal service district for that area and assess a tax.
But the point is, you would have to first create the MSD and determine the boundaries of those particular properties. And I'm assuming that this board has determined that this sand endorsement project, which I'm all for, I mean, let's face it, it's sand, we're a tourist, this is a coast, this is what we need. But this board is also, I think, rightfully determined that it benefits the entire town, at least through this year's budget. And so, but this MSD creates a mechanism by which these particular properties, and I don't know how many, but however many out of the entire town, could be hit with a special, assessed a special tax. Why wouldn't the MSD be, for example, let's just face it, I live on 124 Sand Dollar, okay? I access the beach in the 569 public access point, which is within this area. Why wouldn't you do the entire width of the island for the MSD?
Well, you certainly could make it larger. If you make the whole town the MSD, then the MSD itself doesn't benefit to a greater extent. I assume the theory is that the houses along that stretch are benefiting by having direct access to that beach, at least to a greater extent than everybody else that accesses the beach across the river.
Could you make the entire town an MSD for this project?
No.
Okay, but you could do, for example, like I just said, the entire width of the island, who ostensibly access the beach, at those points, and take direct advantage. That's the only place I get to the beach is when I'm up here. But I mean, that's, when I want to go to the beach, that's where I go. Wouldn't that be, an appropriate way to determine an MSD? I'm just worried about some future board who might want to do a special tax, and I want as many people part of it that are truly the beneficiaries of it.
The limits of the municipal service district directly correlate to the limits of the project, the design engineering.
I understand that.
That's the way that it was going in.
And I get that, I understand that, but it could be different and still meet the terms of the bond, correct?
You can if the board finds that those people are benefiting to a greater extent than the rest of the town.
Okay, so if you just went the entire width of the island, within those boundaries of all the properties within that, I think that would be a clear way that the board could say that would benefit, would obtain benefit.
I didn't say it was clear, I just said you could.
Okay, got it.
Okay, let's give someone else the floor from, yes.
A question, saw the quote of, $500,000 house with taxes go up, $350 a year, which is 7 cents per
That's from the
thousand.
budget ordinance. Yes.
Okay, that's 7 cents per thousand. Is that for everybody, or is that just people in the MSD? So the 7 cents per thousand was everybody to get the project off the ground. What happens
To pay for the project.
in future years? Does the 7 cents stay in the budget for the whole town
That,
for
That-
for paying for this?
that 7-cent tax increase is, sufficient to pay for 10 years the
Bond obligation.
necessary amount to pay the entire debt. So,
Okay.
does that make?
All right, so the whole community is paying for the 7 cents.
Right,
Yes, sir.
right now.
Now, I would offer one cautionary term to follow up with the lady said. I happen to have served on the Pinehurst Village Town Council for 10 years. We had formed a very nice municipal services stream to take care of some people who were on ponds that caught some drainage. And everything was fine, it didn't cost them much every year until the levee broke. And we had a bill for $500,000 for 23 people. And it became a very ugly situation, and we worked our way through it. But my point is you make the case that, well, this enhances the value. There is a liability in having this potential further expense to those of us that would be in the MSD.
Okay, let me interrupt just a minute. We've got a point of order here. We have the floor open for questions. The floor is not open for debate. If you have a presentation you want to make, an argument that you want to make, when we get through the questions, you will come up here where Mr. Hewitt's standing, give us your name and make your case. But right now, let's do questions.
No, sir. All right, I was just
I don't mean to
trying
spank,
elaborate and ask a
yeah,
question.
I'm not trying to spank you, sir.
Right, no, that's fine.
Okay, but we're just trying to
asking a question.
preserve time here.
Okay.
All right, questions.
Question, is there a way that in creating this MSD for the 10-year term, one, to limit it to only 10 years, which is the terms of the bond? That's one question. And secondly, is there a way to limit to where a special tax could not, that this board would be bound to not increase the tax on that properties during the term? Legally.
No and no.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Are these properties mostly the ones that don't have, there's not as many public accesses? No, there's probably not access to all the way down the beach, but is this stretch, have limited beach access? I'm sure there's a,
No.
Some of it does and some of it does not.
It's half the beach, some of it does and some of it doesn't.
Right.
Is there a property there that doesn't have immediate access to the beach?
Yes.
Access.
Okay, but we're going to stay to the questions. Yes, sir.
Is there any kind of insurance that the scope of work will be protected in the event of a hurricane before it's completed or directly after, some timeline directly after it's done? Like, if there's a storm that all washes away, all this money that's to be paid for 10 years goes to what?
What we're relying on there is federal damage, through FEMA. And that's the way, our engineered beach qualifies for FEMA storm damages through category B. And we've used that several times here before. As a matter of fact, we're incorporating a prior storm damage project in this program.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, ma'am?
Can the MSD be terminated? I understand that now the vote would be for permanent, and understand, but could, in the future, could the board terminate the MSD?
I'll take a stab. In the future, I'm assuming once the bonds are retired, there will not be a need for a continuance of the municipal service district. In fact, I believe that Snagstead is actually getting ready to terminate theirs.
The new board would have the right to try to do it again or extend whatever. But once the bonds are paid, that's the end of that project. But that doesn't prevent them from doing the same thing under a new project. Yes, sir.
Wasn't there something said at a meeting months ago that this type of project had a finite life, something like 10 to 15 years, it might have to be repeated.
That's what the bondsman was just saying. Yes, sir. More questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Hewitt. Hold on, Mr. Hewitt, we got a late comer here. Yes, sir.
Probably a silly question, but, is there, part of the effort when the sand is pushed up, is there anything that's done to make sure that it doesn't damage, the property by pushing up the sand? Is there any, insurance or any kind of cover, how would that be handled?
Or, this what you're talking about during the construction phase, if we knock your walkway down?
No, I was thinking, along the lines of, if the sand is being, that much sand is being pushed back, and let's say, I don't know, wind or whatever, and that sand somehow, damages, the property is damaged in, the process of doing that, or, let's say your house is in sand. Is there any,
Let me try to answer that one. We have a design template that whenever the sand is put up on the beach, it is designed so that it will mate with the existing dune, and then, sand fence and vegetation will be put out there to capture any blowing sand. But that is an exact circumstance that occurred up on the Outer Banks. They didn't plant sand fence and vegetation when they put their project down, and we're having to use backhoes to scoop sand out of those oceanfront swimming pools. So that's, that's one of the reasons why we've insisted on having the one of the permit requirements to be sand fence and vegetation, so that it will capture that blowing sand and assist with the terraforming.
Yes, ma'am.
You may have already answered this, but would you mind repeating what is the length of time and the amount of funding that oceanfront property owners would be liable for, separate from the rest of the island and the rest of the mainland people who use the oceanfront? What is the length of time and the amount of money that we,
The bond-
oceanfront property
The
owners?
bond is 10 years, and the bond is in an amount of $11.5 million. I think our actual, ordinance that we're adopting directly is 12 million, not the 6 million, but the budget is of $11.5 million.
So in addition to our 43% tax increase
No.
for all of us?
No,
No.
that tax increase will assist in the payment of that $11.5 million over 10 years.
And there's no, if I understand the question correctly, there's no current plan for you to pay any different than anybody else in the town.
Correct.
There's no additional liability for you on the oceanfront in the project than anybody else that's being levied that tax increase or taxes in general in the town.
For the length of time of the bond?
Yes, ma'am.
10 years?
Yes, sir.
Just one more brief question. If it becomes, cost 16 million, who bears the overrun?
The budget is set and will be subject to a negotiation with the most responsive bidder to reduce the scope of the project to fit within the funds that are budgeted.
One of the requirements the local government commission has for approving the financing will be that the town actually has their bids in hand, so that the local government commission, when they approve it, is confident that the funding is in place to complete the project.
Mr. Marwitz?
Here's a what if. We know that there was a lawsuit giving, seeking to give the owners of beachfront ownership of the dry sand. I assume that lawsuit is still in force. What happens if they win? If it becomes the Ashley and John and people who live on the beach actually own to the wet sand? We just spent $15 million putting sand on their property?
Thank you.
I'm gonna let Noel.
I live on a canal, just to be,
I'm gonna let Noel answer that one.
I sold my house today.
That's right, you don't live on the
I
beach.
don't live on there anymore.
So, just so I make sure I understand your question, you're asking what happens if the, town of Mineral Nye's case, the Supreme Court determined that, the public does not have right to use the dry sand beach?
Yes.
I don't think that anybody knows the answer to your question, but I will tell you that I've had several discussions in the last couple of weeks based on the briefs that were submitted to the Supreme Court that it could potentially jeopardize beach renourishment projects because of the fact that if the public can't access the dry sand beach and the public is funding a beach renourishment project that adds sand to the dry sand beach for the benefit of those property owners that are adjacent to the ocean beaches, that somebody could determine that that is an exclusive benefit that those properties are receiving to the detriment of the public as a whole. So it could be very interesting in the event that the Supreme Court determines something other than the longstanding principle that the dry sand beach is subject to the public trust right.
Ms. Atkins?
My question is, once we start this in November, and they make the decision in December, are we committed to going ahead with the project?
Depends, I would say, would depend on whether or not we're in the process of it, as in we've started placing sand on the beach, whether or not somebody seeks injunctive relief to prevent the town from placing the sand on the beach, and what the legislature and the court, or the court puts in its order. I'm not certain that I'm not the Supreme Court of North Carolina, but, beach renourishment is well established as a need for the state's tourism economy. So, if the towns don't have the ability to do it or fund it, I don't know how it's gonna get done in detriment of all private property owners that are adjacent to the ocean beaches.
Ms. Atkins?
I just want to know, will there be, after the sand is put on the beach, will there be any restrictions to the oceanfront homeowner of adding steps to get down there? You have to go over the beach.
That's an inspector question.
Could you repeat it to us?
yeah,
The question is, once the project is complete, can an oceanfront owner build steps oceanward to the dry sand area?
That would, the determination of how far those steps could go would be the same as it is now. We would have to go out and make a determination as to whether or not that new sand builds a dune substantial enough in order to protect those properties behind it, or that property behind it. If not, then the steps could not go any further, but if so, then that new dune would be redesignated as a frontal dune, and then you could under the town's ordinance.
Okay, so the protectable easement will not handle the owner putting the steps over there.
And of course, it's subject to all CAMA rules as well as the town rules. Any more questions? If not, Mr. Hewitt,
Quick one, sir.
Yes, Mr. Architect.
Is there any specification in the RFP, if it's been written yet, to the granular size of the sand that's gonna be put on the beach?
It's part of the permit
Yes.
conditions. There's grain size.
Size and how sharp the edges are and everything you can imagine. All right, now we're gonna move, thank you, Mr. Hewitt. We're gonna move to commentary. If you have a comment or a position you want to state, now is the time to make your case. If you'll be recognized. Ms. Atkins, come give us your name and where you live and what's on your mind.
What is on my mind, right?
We're gonna find out right now.
My name is Gay Atkins, and I live at 129 Ocean Boulevard, East Holden Beach. And I guess my question is, on item 19, that you all are looking and have looked at establishing or instructing staff or agent concerning negotiations with pricing firm of land involved.
This is,
This is,
Want me now?
no, we want you, darling, but we don't want you right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's the meaty
I
part.
can't just talk now.
No. We are now
Couple minutes.
looking for comments on what the public hearing's all about, and that is a municipal service district. Okay, Ms. Jordan? Jordan. My humble apologies.
Good evening, Board. My name is Elaine Jordan. I'm General Counsel for Coastal Companies. My office is at 131 OBW. I live at 124 Sand Dollar, and as I mentioned, probably out of order, I access the beach at the 569 or so public access point there. All of those properties within the range of this Central Reach project. The concerns I have, probably my questions have anticipated some of the concerns that I have. One, I'm very optimistic and positive about the project. We all know that financing of sand renourishment is the issue. How do you get the money to do it? And this town is coming up with a way that it has never done before, through the issuance of special obligations bonds and through creation of a special tax district. We call it a municipal service district, but it's a special tax district. And that's concerning, not because of what this board, its intentions and its plans are, but for the next 10 years, or perhaps longer, considering that this MSD could, in fact, is permanent and only goes away if a future board terminates it, even though the bonds may be gone. I think we need to be very, very cautious and very strategic about where the boundaries of this MSD. I understand you have to have one, okay? If we're going to issue the bonds, which I understand is the way we're going to finance it, so you gotta have one. But does the boundary, is it really appropriate strategically in thinking not just this year, but 10 years or more, that it only be the boundaries of where the sand is actually going to be placed? If you created the boundaries larger, brought in, I understand you can't take the entire town, because then it's kind of inconsistent with the concept of a special service. But why not expand it beyond that as a true recognition that this board has made that the entire town is benefiting? Because it seems to be a little bit inconsistent to say the entire town is benefiting, that we're gonna have it in the budget, we're gonna create this MSD that could be from some future board recognize that these are the only properties that are benefiting from it. And I think that's a very, I think we need to be very careful about making that type of resolution when in fact it should be more than that. Which then, in the horror of horrors, that there is some kind of future board that does want to actually impose a special tax for whatever reason. Perhaps there's a larger project that comes along, we need to have some more money. Perhaps we decide we don't want to increase the tax for the entire town, we'll just impose it on these. Perhaps there is a huge over budget on even this project, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we gotta come up with some money somewhere. And the MSD becomes the vehicle that you all are creating to do that. So let's not just create the vehicle, let's look at the future and create a vehicle that is less likely to create a situation where a tax could be imposed only on particular property owners when we all know that there are many more properties, in fact, the entire town that benefits. So I ask you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Anyone else want to state your case? I see a lot of smart people out there, and somebody's got to say something. It's all been said? All right. Is there a motion we declare this public hearing closed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The public hearing is now closed. The regular meeting, with the approval of commissioners, will now start, which was scheduled for beginning the hearing at 7 and immediately following the hearing, the public meeting, regular public meeting of the month. So that's what we're going to do. And the first item, and those of you that may or may not know, in the back of the room, my left corner, there are papers back there that gives you an agenda and maybe some other things that you can follow. But anyway, we're on number 1 item of the regular meeting. And the first thing we're going to do, let's take a moment and reflect and be thankful for the things that we have been blessed with in this world, and keep in mind for those people who have, and especially suffering in the flood area in Louisiana area and around the world. Just take a moment of silence. Thank you very much. And now may I say officially welcome to our meeting. And now let's do number 3, which we're going to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag, which is to my right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 4, we're going to consider the agenda for approval as presented. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir?
I'd like to request that item 12 be amended as follows.
Is that the document you gave us, Mr. Hewitt?
Yes, sir.
The modification document?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir.
Item 12, scheduling a date after Municipal Service District for the Central Project as reads, and consider adoption of resolution directing application to the Local Government Commission for approval of special obligation bonds.
Everyone understand what Mr. Hewitt's asking you to do? All right. Anything else?
Do we need a motion or?
If there's nothing else, it'd be a motion on this one item. Or we can approve it as requested by Mr. Hewitt. What's your motion?
Move we approve it as requested by Mr. Hewitt.
Second.
Is there a second? Discussion, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion stands approved, and the agenda has been amended as requested by Mr. Hewitt. Number 5, approval of the minutes for the meeting of July 19. Is there a motion to approve them as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. They are approved, Madam Clerk. And now number 6, public comments on agenda items. Now, Ms. Atkins, it's your turn. We remember.
We remember, okay. Okay, regards to item 19, as I was saying, you all are considering negotiating a price of land that is owned by Holden Beach Development, Holden Beach Enterprises, and the fishing pier. At this point, I don't understand how we could ever have the money to purchase it. Also, we are purchasing our own commercial tax base. Why?
That- They're not going to be able to answer you and be in order, so
I
we're
know,
just,
but I'm just, why would you purchase for the town the commercial tax base? That's it.
okay, all right, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? An opportunity to address an agenda item. All right, if nothing else, we will move on. Chief, you look like you're ready to go.
Ready to go, sir?
Police report, Chief Wally Lane.
Good evening, everyone.
Wait a minute, hold it, I'm out of order. Sorry, Chief. Marty Ironwood, did you want to talk or not?
Well, I'm not on the agenda item, so I'm at the end, right?
Ranger Street, okay, I'm still out of order. Now we're back in order. All right, go ahead, Chief.
My turn. Anyway, it continues to be a fairly typical busy summer. Fortunately, still nothing major has occurred on the island. And hopefully that will continue for the rest of the season. Though my favorite holiday is on the horizon, that being Labor Day. And that's what we're trying to do, make it to Labor Day at this point, and then to the end of hurricane season. And so far, so good in that regard, too. There was a break-in last night on Brunswick Avenue. Person that broke in had a bad dad. There just happened to be someone in the residence when they broke in, and that someone just happened to be armed. Yes, he did. And held the young man at gunpoint until our officers swiftly arrived and took him to the Crossbar Hotel.
Okay,
First-degree burglary. On a lighter note, our entire department has been adopted by the Adopt a Cop program. The program was started by two young ladies who are wives of folks in law enforcement right here in Brunswick County. Since they started it, I think a couple of months ago, and those of you that Facebook, I don't, but those of you that do probably saw something on Facebook concerning that. They've adopted the sheriff's department twice, and every department in the county has been adopted. And what that means is they come, they bear gifts, they share their appreciation for what we do, and we greatly appreciate their efforts. Since these young ladies started the program, it's now started to spread across the country. So if you're looking for a worthwhile project to become involved in, check these folk out. Might be worth the effort. We certainly appreciate it. Glad to answer any questions.
Chief, I noticed in the activity log here, there are a couple of items that piqued my interest with respect to ordinances that we have modified. And one is the animal complaint. So you had 11 instances of that.
Yes.
So, and then the noise nuisance complaint. So simply put, the modifications we made to the ordinances with respect to both of those,
Yes.
are they working as we intended from your point of view, since you're tasked with enforcing them?
I think absolutely. I think absolutely. I also still think the signs are working. It does say, "Welcome to Holden Beach" now.
Yep, we knows that.
It does say that.
Yeah.
It does say that. And
With-
then, no. But realistically, the no has worked all summer. I mean, I've encountered 3 dogs on the beach 4 days a week, Memorial Day to the day. 3 dogs.
So the animal complaints are more, are they
It's not-
reflective of more awareness of the requirement?
Well, and
For leashes?
realistically, most of those aren't on the Strand. Most of
Okay.
those aren't on the Strand.
Okay.
There was a dog bite on the east end of the Strand a few weeks ago, but it was after the hours, and the dog was taken into custody, and
Okay.
the folks were charged and that sort of thing.
Okay. The noise complaints, did you have to,
We haven't had to take anybody to jail yet. We show up one time, we explain the ordinance to them.
Okay.
We explain the ramifications of the ordinance to them, and for whatever reason, so far,
they are compliant.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions from Commissioner? All right, Mr. Chief, move along to the next point on the agenda, if you would.
Item number 8. And I hate to read to you guys, because I know you all can read, but for the benefit of the audience that may not have an agenda. Some time ago, we received a request from the chapel to amend our parking ordinance concerning their property. In doing that, we come up with a memorandum of agreement between the town and the chapel, wherein we will make the modification that they requested to their parking in exchange for the town being able to use the chapel's parking lot. And the staff recommends approval dependent on the chapel signing the MOA. And essentially what they're asking for is that the property from Rothschild to where the parsonage is, just on the other side of the chapel, be designated as no parking. Currently, there's no parking from OBW to Brunswick Avenue. This would just complete that L, for lack of a better term. And inside, in the agenda, there's a Google Earth that actually shows what they're requesting. All that being said, we, the staff itself, recommends approval depending on the chapel's agreement and signing the MOA.
The chapel has or has not had an opportunity, the trustees, to review this as presented?
Don't believe they have yet.
Okay, so you're asking for approval subject to the chapel?
Subject to their approval.
Commissioners, you got any questions?
Yeah,
Well,
I have a comment.
Yeah.
While I appreciate the offer to use the parking lot, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with a quid pro quo, exchange for anything that we're offering as far as parking. I think the request stands on its own merit. I don't think we need a linkage between us using the parking lot and the request for no parking. So I don't see a need for it, and I don't feel comfortable establishing that precedent of, if you give me something, we'll give you a no parking consideration, so.
Yeah, I had a similar comment. I did have a discussion indirectly regarding the trustees' knowledge of this, and they, as I understand it, are scheduled to consider this in a week. I have a similar concern about what the chapel, what it says in writing, that the chapel shall allow the use of the chapel parking lot for the town and others. It's my understanding, and in discussion with others, that has been a practice of the chapel anyway. But when it's in writing, I'm concerned that the chapel is excessively giving away a right to the use of that property. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to amend this memorandum of agreement to delete that first line item under the chapel shall. I think it's fine for the chapel to pay for the purchase of the signs, but I'm uncomfortable with that first statement.
And I don't think there was any ill will in the fabrication of the MOA. It was just, and the town realizes that it's always been that way, and this would just make that
always being that way, a little more formal, I think, was the thought process.
Okay,
But we're good with what y'all are good with.
all right, we gotta get in order here.
Yep.
Make your motion.
I move that we adopt this, or we approve this memorandum of agreement with the amendment that Section C, titled "The Chapel Shall," we delete number 1, which states allow the use of the chapel parking lot for the town and others.
I second the motion.
Second. And discussion.
Yes,
Yes.
probably more than one of us.
Pardon me?
I just get, well, if that's the determination that the Board of Commissioners wants to proceed with, then I would just recommend striking any memorandum of agreement because you're not exchanging anything, and then just adopt ordinance B. I mean, sorry, 8B. Just changes the purpose.
Paying for the signs is de minimis. I mean,
Right. It's the town code, like I say.
Yeah, my, my.
right with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So you're gonna withdraw?
Delete. Well,
You have to change
I'll
it.
amend my motion, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I move that we strike that we not adopt the memorandum of agreement and approve the ordinance as it's written, ordinance 16-13.
Do you agree?
I agree.
All right, sir. Everybody understand what we are?
Yeah, but I
Now
have a comment.
discussion on the new motion.
Okay, like, I'm a member of the chapel, and I go regularly. My only problem with this is, every citizen here wants to maintain their yard. And if we take and say, okay, you can't park right there because we're worried about their grass, then what about everybody along Brunswick Avenue, who gets all the people from the festival? What about the people right across the street who have people park on their lawn every Sunday, no fail, because they don't want to park in the parking lot for some reason? I'm just saying, there's an awful lot of other people that are gonna come to us and say, I have the same reason they do. Are we gonna give everybody an exclusion to do this because they don't want someone parking on their grass? When the town has a 10-foot right-of-way on each side of the road? Just a question.
Well, I would respond, I don't think the board would arrive at that conclusion that just because we're doing this, that somebody else would have the right to insist that they get the same treatment. My view was the chapel is a critical part of the view of the site that we're on right here. And when it's beautiful, we got a park across the street now that's beautiful, will attract a lot of attention for us, a lot of support. And I saw the chapel as being just a real plus, having
I'm
that
not
grass
arguing that.
and not being abused by parking.
I've just never seen anybody parking on their grass there.
Oh, they
You
have.
know,
They have, and they've had the water thing messed up. I saw the chains knocked down by people parking, drove across the chains. My view is I would have approved this without much discussion, just because I think it's the right thing to do for the town and for the position we're in here.
I think it's a great question, and I think everyone should have a right to present their case,
Exactly.
just like the chapel is, and just like I think we have another agenda, a community present their case. And we make a decision based on the merits of the individual case. But a good question.
okay.
Any more comments? Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Was that a unanimous?
I didn't say anything, so it has to be.
All right, unanimous, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Chief. All righty. Number 9, discussion and possible action on Point West request for parking restriction, Commissioner Fletcher.
Point West at our last meeting asked that we put a no parking sign, which actually was there before, for no street parking. This is a fairly unique situation in that this area there's no reason for anybody else to go into that street or into the streets in there unless they're a resident. In the agreement within the territory, residents are not allowed to do street parking. That's part of their agreements within the town. The only reason anybody else would go in there, because there's no beach access nearby, so I could imagine the only reason to go in there would be to use some of the amenities, like the swimming pool, but they're not for the public. It's only for the residents. So my view is that the right thing to do would be to make that, as it was before, an enforceable no parking, no street parking within that development.
Do
And
they
I
have a
would-
swimming pool?
I'm sorry?
Do they have a swimming pool?
I don't think they've got amenities, I think.
Two amenities, which is intercoastal, park, that access point, the trespass, and then private beach access.
Private beach access.
So I would move that the Point West parking accommodation be appended to the proposed parking ordinance that we've just adopted.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right, discussion.
Again, I have the same question about this as I have about the others. I understand that no one has a reason to go down there, but all the dead-end streets that go down and dead end into the intercoastal waterway, no one has a reason to go down those and park. Okay?
Well,
So
they do if they
again-
want to go to the beach.
So again, I'm just saying, we're creating a situation where anybody that says, gee, I don't want someone coming down my street parking, come to us and ask us for that same exclusion.
Well, I
My,
think-
my understanding is that this, that the no parking signs have been there for some time. They still are there. I walked through it the other day. But I also understand that street at one time was privately owned by Point West. And then the town took it over, which to me should have been, Point West should have understood that once you do that, then there are right-of-ways along that street, just like any other street maintained by the town. The fact that said, the fact that, and I'm just stating that to say those things need to be considered by any property owner if you have a private street, because now we're here deliberating, designating non-parking over what in fact is a public street. That said, I support approving this because the community has been there for 15-odd years with the street as it currently exists. And I think it's appropriate to consider the history of that development. And in my view, it's unique to the town. So I believe it's warranted.
Any more discussion?
If I could point out a couple of things that or may or may not be pertinent to your consideration, is that the Tide Ridge Drive and Point West streets, the board made an appropriation in this year's budget to repave those streets, about $100,000 plus. And in order to do that, there's going to have to be some stormwater remedies in there. It wouldn't make sense to repave. If we pave the road now as it exists, with the stormwater situation in there, not only in Point West, but also for several of the lots on the south side of Coquina Drive, and to the west, a couple of them to the west of Point West Drive, that pavement's just going to pump. So I just offer that up for your considerations. We've got some work to do in there with that subdivision, and just want to offer that to the board.
Looks like we have a staff member.
Staff member, yes, sir.
I hope everyone remembers that it hadn't been too long ago that we went through this parking ordinance. There was a lot of work done by the planning department on this parking ordinance, by the planning board. And Tide Ridge came up. It came up quite a bit. And if I remember correctly from some of the conversations, there's not a whole lot of places in there that you can park under the current ordinance as it's written. I mean, you can't park, I think, within 125 feet of intersections. which puts you down from the main drive from OBW. And then there's another intersection in there at the other end, which puts you 125 feet from each end. So I'm trying to figure out exactly where you're gonna be. What I'm trying to say is that if you are prohibiting parking, it can't be a great big area that you're prohibiting, but what are you prohibiting that portion of the parking from? I mean, I don't have an idea because we haven't taken a look at exactly where those numbers come out. But it seems to me like about the only place you could park in there would be maybe along the end of Coquina and maybe along the end of those two cul-de-sacs, somewhere down there, close to the end of those. I don't know where else you would be legally be able to park under our parking ordinances. So, I mean, is that the intent, is to limit that? I mean, I don't think there's anywhere to park along that main drive, is there, Luke?
Yes, sir.
Where?
On the, Point West, is coming, the gap from 125 feet off of Ocean Boulevard and 25 feet off of Coquina Video, the gap is about 125, 100 feet, 150 feet. During that area, on the entryway in, where we have extensive landscaping. So that is a restricted area, because you have fire hydrant, you have driveways, you have the 125 feet and the 25 feet on the side, Coquina. By Ridge, you only have the 25 feet where there are T sections on Point West. And then you, on the plan that you approved 3-4 years ago, you had blocked out where the fire hydrants are on both ends and that turnaround where you have the birdhouses. So there's quite, most of Todd Bridge then is
On the left side? Coquina?
On both the north and
Because
south
you got-
side of Pine Ridge, excluding the 25 feet where Point West ties into Pine Ridge, you can walk. And there's 34 lots in there, so there's quite a bit of area that could be parked. Basically, if I may, the covenants in our, the community was sold to us by the developer as a private community. And the covenants restricted parking. So the residents that own the properties in there
There's nothing to do.
cannot park on the street or on the lawn. We're not able, bottom line on this is, we're not able to enforce our covenants, rules, and regulations with the present situation. The town put up signs, no parking in 2012. Some of the signs are still there. At the time, I was told we didn't need to change the ordinance because we have the signs and we can enforce it based on the signs. The developer turned the street over to the town, did not tell the community, and it was an after the fact type of thing, after the deal was done and the street was turned over to the town. And we were told that now it's a town street, now the rules and regulations do not apply.
Has the planning board had an opportunity to review what's proposed?
I haven't been here, but I don't believe that y'all said.
No,
this
sir.
back to the-
No, sir.
Is what needs to be done, the street turned back over to the community? And then you wouldn't have to worry about the paving of it and the water runoff? and
You can't
the
do
parking
that.
issue?
That's,
That's a very complicated legal process for the town to abandon a right-of-way, titled in best in the adjacent property owners from the midline to the either side of the right-of-way. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, I'm just saying it's not an action that this board would want to take. I would not think tonight without having a lot more information about what the implications of that from a stormwater perspective and the fact that the street's getting ready to be repaved with public funds to $1,000.
and you've got POW bill money that was receipted from that. Yeah, it's a pile of stuff.
Some of us in the room have been through the process of withdrawal with the town. And so, yeah, it's complicated, but it's doable. But I would certainly encourage the participation of the Planning and Zoning Board. It seems to me that there's a difference between Mr. Cutterjar's comments and the town building inspections and planning department. make sure that everybody in the audience, as well as commissioners, know what you're approving. And simply, I would just suggest, because I know I'm nothing other than a gavel man, but I would encourage you to maybe table this until the next meeting and so that everybody's on the same page. But one more thing about the history that you brought up, Commissioner. Those of us that were here when this subdivision was put in, there were several things that were granted outside of the norm. The entranceway with the island in the middle, the size width of coquina, which does not meet the town requirements. It's 20 feet wide, and the town code's 50 feet wide. And I'm not gonna sit here and try to make a case, because I don't want it to debate or whatever, but I'm just saying, maybe all of us don't know the whole history, and the developer may have done a favor for those property owners in there by saving them $100,000 that they didn't have to spend on the subdivision because the taxpayers of the town are now spending it. So, you know, there's a lot of debate and understanding and review of the history here, and I sure would feel better if the commissioners saw on a map and had some input from the P&Z board as to what's being approved. But that's my say. There is a motion on the floor, there's a second on the floor, we've had discussion.
Clark's got something.
The motion, I can't go back and approve, I can't add to an ordinance that was just approved. So I would have to have exact wording as to what to put in another ordinance to present to you guys before we can do that. We can't go forward like that. So if, I mean, if you don't want to send it to P and Z, that's your choice, but I would have to know exactly what to put in an ordinance to do that for you guys.
Well, at this point, we need to send it to P and Z. I mean, I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. So do we need a motion to send it to P and Z?
You need a,
As I
if you're gonna
understand-
vote on it, if you don't have a motion to table it, or just let the motion die and bring it up again. Is that right, madam? So you can just, whenever I call for the vote, you can just not approve it and bring it back on the table later. Or you can officially table it until a time, date certain, which is whatever you want to do.
Do I have an option to withdraw the motion?
Yes?
I so withdraw.
I second.
And we have, all right, we've withdrawn the motion, so we're going, without another motion, we're gonna move to the next item on the agenda. And we're gonna leave that, I guess, with the understanding,
P and Z.
Mrs. Eisenhower.
I would like.
Yeah, and you, sir, will get some input from the P and Z and your department.
Well, do y'all want us to review it for an ordinance change for you to either approve or deny, so that we come back with the actual wording that you will need?
Yes.
Yes.
Bring back the wording.
So we're looking
This is for planning and zoning,
Yeah,
not
so
for
we're
the
looking for a
planning
text
department.
amendment to the parking ordinance for Point West.
Yes.
Correct.
That's what we're looking for. Okay.
And bring us a map that shows what we are voting on.
Mhm.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're number 10, report from Planning and Zoning Board. Vicki Myers, chairperson.
We actually have two things for you this evening. The first thing that we were, you had sent us to look at was, you asked us to look at, prepare a summary of the existing controls on structure size. So you should have a copy of, what we put together, which was one sheet that has the current constraints on structure size, and another brief summary, of our zoning districts, kind of what they say in our chapter 157. I do want to point out that these documents are summaries and overviews, and they should never be ironclad. Because if we prepared a summary, there's a million different exceptions. So don't, understand it for summaries. And if anything, in specific would need to go to the staff to be reviewed. So if that makes sense. So we've done what you asked.
The
if I may, I had discussion on this, and I know it was lengthy and laborious to indicate at least my intent, and I thought it was the intent of the board. The reason we were going to planning and zoning was to address what, in our view, was a weakness in the current constraints on structure size, as you've put here. So, yeah, you stated what the current ones are, but what I was anticipating, and maybe I'm just too optimistic about an outcome, was that the board would come to us with an option for us to consider within either the bounds of the existing constraints or to propose a method whereby we could limit house structures, because the fact is there are current dwellings that, in my understanding, have met all of these restrictions, yet the structure was approved because of the footprint which is stated within these constraints. It was a footprint of the total lot. Therefore, you may recall a previous meeting I said, so, as I understand it, someone can purchase 10 lots and build a house within that current footprint of a third of the footprint of the 10 lots, and that's what we would have. To me, that is not in accordance with the intent of a planning and zoning board. So I applaud the work. I really am not asking for bring me another rock, but
No, I think exactly what you're saying is where we're headed. We went with the exact tasker that we got, which was to come up with those two documents. So
okay.
now I think
Maybe I spoke too soon. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
The next step, I think, needs to be identification of the holes. Where do we see potential problems, with going forward? Where could things happen? And I mean, it's an issue that's, continues to perk along the whole coast. I think Greg mentioned Oak Island, that was in today's Star News. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. They have a 5,000-foot limit, and now they've got a house that's just under it, and they're still not happy with it. Currituck is also, they had they're working on a text amendment to their zoning ordinances. They had a public meeting August 12th, and they're looking at things that they need to do. They're, for homes over 5,000 feet, they want to increase the side setbacks. They want to look at proportionality. It continues to go along. The whole coast seems to be involved. So I guess what I'm saying is that we kind of did what you did, what you asked, and
The next step.
You want us to move forward? You need to tell us.
Well, it's my understanding that would have to be a board decision, not an individual telling you that, but so that's an action we could consider. I just want to state that, I've received significant negative feedback based on statements I've made regarding limiting the size of structures. And my intent is not to restrict development on the island for rightful property owners who have invested in their property and want to build a structure that is within the restrictions currently in place. My concern is that with respect to long-range planning, I do not see evidence that we as a town have a complete, comprehensive plan, long-term plan. For example, that the large area that was donated to the town, the Griffin property, my understanding, I have seen a subdivision plat on that property that in my assessment is obsolete, does not reflect the way that land is, the intent of that land. So to me, that's the first example I saw where we are not abiding by what we have on paper. And when you don't abide by what's on paper, I have a concern that then we are in either a reactionary mode based on what someone wants to do, or, but more importantly, we aren't doing what's documented that we should be doing. So maybe I'll just stop at that.
So
No,
they've
if-
asked you for an update to the land use plan?
That might be a good start.
That was, 2009, when it was approved.
Okay,
And that area that you're referring to is designated conservation,
exactly.
correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yet, even if though it is, I witnessed before sitting on this board, I witnessed deliberations that offered that subdivision plot as rationale for the staff approving or recommending approval of construction. So maybe that's the way to address it, is to update the land use plan.
If I could speak to that process on updating the land use plan, that's not an overnight update. That process probably takes about 18 months. We are due for an update. It was approved in 2009, and until recently, the new 7B planning guidelines, we were required to update it every 5 years. That template has been removed now, but it is an excellent strategic planning document, something that any type of revision to a zoning ordinance has to have a consistency statement in that. Whenever you do that, it's got to be consistent with the land use plan. Normally, those types of efforts, like I said, take 18 months or so, and would require that you get some outside expertise to come in and also facilitate that.
And it's about, 15 grand, right?
It's about 30 grand.
Right, you can get a grant for 15. Somebody around here is doing one, I don't remember.
Right. Ocean Isle Beach is doing theirs, and Shalot is also.
A big process. Not that it's, I mean, it's a great document, not that it shouldn't be updated, it's just, it's a big task, so,
Thank you.
okay?
So I think the question at hand is that the task, should that happen before we go forward and identify, as you're describing, holes in the zoning ordinance? Does that make sense to do that first?
Well, your land use plan is a comprehensive land use plan. If your intentions are to regulate, you're probably not gonna be able to do it with a land use plan.
There are two different issues, but I was reminded of the problem of the land use plan as it currently exists was being used to request variances, and that's what I had a problem with. So that's the one issue. So to address that, I would be in favor of, obviously there was an intent at one point to update every 5 years. When was it approved?
9.
Oh, 9.
Should have been updated in 14 if they kept this
Okay.
current regulation.
So I think it's a prudent thing to do, and I would be in favor of us addressing that. More so we can, so that can be reviewed by, and get public comment and board deliberation so that we know what our plan is and modify it if we feel it's appropriate. But from my input as one commissioner, I don't have a specific recommendation for the P and Z board.
I mean, you said there's two issues at hand, right? And I think Mr. Evans just said that the land use plan does not address or influence, am I putting words in your mouth?
Well, it's not going to help you with regulations. I mean, if here's something you want to keep from happening, the land use plan is basically a guide that you're
Okay, then, how then does a land use plan relate to my hypothesis of someone purchasing 10 lots and being able to build whatever they want to it based on the footprint? Because that is looking at only one restriction. It obviously does not have anything to do with a land use plan.
It may in that there is a requirement that when a zoning ordinance is adopted, that there be a consistency statement that the amendment to the zoning ordinance is consistent with the town's adopted land use plan. So that is a requirement by statute that you have that consistency statement. What I hear you saying is that you do not think that, or potentially that the existing land use plan and the direction the town is going is not that they are inconsistent. And I think that the fix to that is, has been pointed out, would be to look at the land use plan and find out. But in order to really amend the land use plan, it is a very lengthy process, but you really would need to know what the holes are that you're trying to fix to know whether or not it's consistent or not consistent. Town manager, you can feel free to correct.
I was just gonna.
Let me just ask this question to that point then. Did the land use plan, we had a case where 2 lots were purchased adjacent to each other, and 2 structures were built on what was originally 3 lots. So the land use plan either allowed it, or we didn't meet the intent of the land use plan. That's something that occurred last year.
Right, and just like at the planning board, I spoke about this at the planning board, the land use plan does not address the recombining of lots if they meet the zoning requirements. But
Then what good is a land use plan? I mean, you're saying it's based on zoning.
well, what I'm saying is that when you change your land use plan, it has to be consistent. If you start writing stuff into the land use plan, then you have to change the zoning to match it. It's got to be consistent, but it has to work both ways. You can't start with one document and then form another document that this one is no longer consistent with. That's what I was trying to say.
The land use plan is more one of a broader policy statements. That's what the land use plan does.
Land use plan includes things like we want to encourage sidewalks to be constructed with new development. We would like for.
Okay, all right.
Things.
I only referred to land use plan because that's what I was hearing the planning and zoning board talk about in terms of what needs to be updated.
So-
I've said enough on
Yeah,
this.
so if land use is a guide, then really we have to look at, I think look at the holes in the zoning ordinances and then look to see if it conflicts with our current guide, which is the land use. And if it does, then we then have to update the land use if that's the case. Okay.
And see, the land use plan is tied in many ways not to the zoning ordinance as much as it is to requirements from outside agencies. If you don't have a land use plan and you're not consistent with it, you don't get funding for certain things.
Okay.
And your land use plan may say you gotta have X amount of parking or X amount of open space, you know, it's that kind of thing. It's not and it's like David said, it's a policy, but that policy, those policies have to be in place in order for you to qualify for a lot of things.
So,
And it used to have to be updated every 5 years, but they just limited that and said that you no longer have to update them every 5 years.
okay.
It's recommended.
So to get back on track, I'd like for the P and Z to take the next step to, like Oak Island, like the other communities that are looking for, in your description as holes in the zoning ordinances, and maybe coordinate with them to learn what they're discovering, think outside of the box and discuss, how the best way to accomplish what we want to do is again, not a restriction, but make sure the intent of our zoning is being followed as well as the letter of the law.
Well, then let me drill down a little bit on that, just to make sure that we move in the correct where you're headed. So really what you're looking for
I'd say yes. I mean, I think the other communities are using, there's nothing magic about 5,000, but it seems that's the point where,
It's a starting point.
yeah.
Yeah, Oak Island
Mr.
just found
Evans.
out that 4998 supports 14 bedrooms.
Mr. Evans?
Well, pick a number. I mean,
There's no limited size on bedrooms.
no,
You can't limit number of bedrooms.
you can't limit it. That's a law.
Right, right.
So, and there's no limited size to that bedroom.
So we really probably come back to the issue, and the real problems are that extra large houses or houses with lots of bedrooms sometimes get used more than even the bedrooms are supporting. I've got a 4-bedroom near me that has 10 cars with families in each car, and they rent every year. They come in, the parking lot's just full. So it's this number of people that stay in a house. It's the noise level that tends to come with much, much larger groups that get together. It's the parking issue for the fire department, not to be able to get to a house, and people even to get cars out of the way if there is a fire. You got 25, 30 cars to move. If that group that just built the 3,000 square foot houses, if they get 25 cars in there, it's gonna be hard for the fire department to get them cleared out to get near the houses. So there's a lot of other issues, not just the idea of a large house. Because large houses can be beautiful, the 200 foots are beautiful on the beach. They've got a pool, they're great looking. But if they put twice as many people in there that are designed to be in there, we're gonna have issues. So it may not be the size as much as the usage and the other corollary things that go with having a house.
But
And
I
whether
do
we want
think-
them on this beach to be that way.
Yeah, but there is a spectrum
Right.
where we gotta stop somewhere.
Right.
So
The more
We're asking
likelihood,
them to delineate where that stopping point is.
right, I think no one wants to say.
So I think that's more of what I'm seeing as your next step, is what are our possibilities? These are our current restrictions.
Right.
But what can we perhaps change in this to restrict it? And look at what other people are doing and get ideas from them as well, but what are the possibilities of what could be done? Does that give you a,
Madam Attorney, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna, state similar to what Ms. Eisenhower said, which is that you can look and see that there are these issues being faced up and down the coast. There are a number of municipalities right now that are dealing with this exact same issue, struggling with the same thing that, you commissioners are struggling with articulating, because it is very complex what you can and cannot regulate. And based on your existing code, but also on the state law. So, a good starting point from P and Z would probably be looking at what other communities are doing and trying to get a sense of what are these issues that are being created. Is it the waste that's being generated? Is it the noise? Is it the, damage to the dune system? Those types of things, so that the commissioners can better determine how to address it for the better of the community.
Well, yeah, I agree. We still have an issue, in my view, of the subdivision plot on the Griffin property. And I won't deliberate it now, but I certainly don't understand how that is still pertinent.
Are you through with the P and Z, Chair?
No,
You're not?
there's a
okay.
second, you got
I
a
am.
second part, don't you?
Okay, are we done with the large structure then?
yes.
Yes.
Move on to our next one. You also asked us last month to look at, numbers on the backsides of canal homes. So we looked at that, there are, some benefits to putting the numbers there. We all discussed it. The staff does bulkhead inspections, dredgers working on the canals.
So with regard to the street signs, we would be adding street signs to the canals that currently don't have a street sign, because the entranceway to each of them does have a street sign. Okay.
You're saying street signs on the
On the
canal
On the
side,
canal.
not the street side?
Yeah, I'm saying the canals currently have one street sign, but only at the entrance to the combination of all canals. There's no, I just
Not
want to
on
understand,
individual
they aren't on individual canals,
Okay.
which is what you're recommending.
Two streets, you know, because you have the street on.
That's right.
On the other, so.
I just want to understand what you were saying, and
Thank you.
thank you, Vicki. And committee.
Number 11, Mr. Hewitt and Ms. Ferguson.
Yes, sir. The ordinance 1614 establishes and creates a Town of Holden Beach Municipal Service District. And the boundaries contained within that district are depicted on the map at page 21 and 22. The certification at page 23 of service on notification of the notices on the required public hearing is, again, at page 23.
Is there a motion?
Can I ask David a question before we?
Sure.
before we-
It's in
No, I need to change it.
there. Okay,
Ms.
yes.
Ferguson,
I'm sorry.
straighten these men out.
I was trying to raise my hand.
Okay,
About what
the,
you're trying to
what Heather's talking about is in the text on page 19, the second line up from the bottom where it says it's published in the Brunswick Beacon, that should read, it was published in the Star News.
May I ask a question? The map that's on page 22, at the top of the page, it looks like there's multiple streets where the houses on there. Is it not just the houses that are on the beach, or are those lots actually underwater?
There's some lots that are south of the dune. They're below the mean high water, they're above the mean high water mark, but south of the primary dune.
Okay. And so further west, that street that's no longer there, that wouldn't be applicable?
That's correct.
I have another question. What would be the repercussions if we do, as was suggested, north-south of the defined area all the way to the intercoastal waterway?
You're going to invalidate the notification of the property owners, and you get to redo.
And what would the repercussions of that would be to our scheduling?
I don't think you're going to be able to accommodate the calendar that we've set forth.
I think the issue at this point is the permit, right, David?
I'm sorry?
The permit, we're trying to be, the permit expires?
In order to get a project done, the permit would expire next December.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And so
what I'm asking.
We have to restart the entire process, including notification, let 4 weeks run. We have to do the math to see, I mean, the local government commission only meets once a month, first Tuesday of every month, and so that becomes an issue as well. We have to kind of sit down with a piece of paper and hit run it.
That's what I thought, but I wanted,
You won't get a project done this winter, is, I think. is what
that's what I thought, but I wanted to get
But
that answer.
Do I read the statute incorrectly when it's, I read and I drew the conclusion that at some point along the way, we can add additional properties within the MSD?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a process for that.
Right. And so it's possible that we could take more and more properties within over this next 10-year period.
That's true.
Okay,
Oh, so we could
we can add
accommodate
properties.
that.
There's a process for that.
Okay, there is a process. Okay. The other thing is, reading the first paragraph, everybody talks about the financing. Tell me if I'm wrong. The financing is part of it, because it says to finance, comma, to provide, comma, or maintain a such district, one or more services. So it's really, this MSD is not just about financing.
Not
Is
at
that-
all. And originally, when this MSD statute came into place, the financing mechanism that we're using was added later and cobbled on with the concept of doing projects in an MSD. The original idea about an MSD was that you would,
You're
tax
defining,
a certain area and you would use those taxes to fund services greater, gold-plated sidewalks.
no,
whatever.
I got to correct you. You're using taxes. I don't know why you're saying that, because my idea is you're defining an area to do something, period. No?
A municipal service district is a district that can be taxed at a different rate. That's the whole purpose of establishing a municipal service district.
Yeah, and that was the original idea. The
Okay.
original idea of an MSD was to tax those folks in order to provide that particular service to a greater extent than was required for the rest of the city.
And just for the commissioner's benefit, the first paragraph that is included in the ordinance is straight out of the statute for the establishment or the purpose behind municipal service.
Well, I don't know why they put a comma after finance then, because that's not how I read it. You know what I'm,
The comma was put there by the state.
yeah, okay. Because it looks like three different things, right? To finance, provide, and maintain, three different things. Not finance to provide, but finance, comma,
I understand.
okay, that's,
I have again, I'll have to inquire as to the proper way to do this, Mr. Mayor, but I have a proposed addition to this ordinance. And the purpose of it is to address feedback that we have received on concern about who's going to be paying for the municipal service district. So
Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have a motion on the table, do we?
that's correct. That's
We-
why I was asking.
So we don't have anything to amend. So
Okay.
if
All right.
I may, let's have a motion to
All right.
approve what's submitted first,
Okay,
and then we'll need a second, and then we can go to your amending.
okay. I move what I would desire to do is I cannot move to approve an amended municipal service district wording.
You are discussing that you would like to potentially offer an amendment to the proposed ordinance that's before the board but has not been moved.
Okay.
That's right. We need to do some moving.
Okay, I move we approve the municipal service district ordinance 16, TAC 14.
I second.
All right, now move your amendment.
I would like to amend the ordinance. I gave everyone a copy of the paragraph that I would like to add. I apologize to the public. I didn't provide copies of this. The purpose of me proposing this is to address the concerns that,
Hold it.
sorry.
Sorry, we got to have a second.
Second, thank
Yeah,
you.
John, second. All right, now you got it.
Okay. I'll read the paragraph and then I'll talk a little briefly about the intent. Whereas the Board of Commissioners for the town of Holden Beach intends to secure funding through special obligation bonds for the municipal service district for the purposes of erosion control and hurricane protection. Payment of principal and interest toward the special obligation bonds will be through a specific line item from the general fund of the budget of the town of Holden Beach, and not through a special assessment of the property owners within the proposed boundaries of the Municipal Services District. It's my belief that this would show the intent of this board, and I understand fully that the only action we can take is the current board. We cannot mandate the actions of a future board. But I felt it was important that this paragraph be added so we can show the intent of this board that and we have already approved the budget for this year that approved a tax hike for the entire town to fund the Central Reach project. So we've already funded it, and this just states our intent within the document that establishes a municipal service district. So I move that it be amended to add this paragraph after paragraph 4 and before paragraph 5.
So I have a comment as well. So this, within the municipal service district, ordinance, we are communicating, I like your idea, we're communicating so they'll know, any future board, if they're gonna act upon this for any other reason, what the purpose and intent of the original board that enacted it.
Yes, simply to document our intent that the town fund this project. And I did have discussion with Councilor Leo, who drafted this ordinance, I understand, and I understand this does not place the ordinance at risk for securing the special obligations bond.
I did also speak with Mr. Leo, and he's fine with you including that in there, but as the attorney for the board, again, this is not something that you are finding future boards. The taxing of the municipal service district, if it was to ever occur, would result as a result of the budget ordinance.
Understand?
But at least it's there.
I understand.
Right, we're communicating our original intent of this ordinance. I second.
Second his motion that we've discussed a little bit.
Oh, I thought we already had a second.
We had a motion, yeah.
You're amending.
Anyway, trying to move things along.
Yeah,
Are you ready to vote, or you want to
Yeah.
talk some
we're
more?
ready to vote.
All right. All in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Madam Clerk, it's unanimous, as I hear it. We on number 12,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Ferguson or Mr. Hewitt?
I got this. It's probably more appropriate to clerk, but we need to schedule a date to hold a special meeting for the final adoption of the ordinance that you just passed, an ordinance establishing and creating a Town of Holden Beach Municipal Service District for the Central Reach project. And to discuss and to consider the adoption of Resolution 1610, resolution directing the application to the Local Government Commission for approval of special obligation
And
bonds.
what time frame does that need to be?
I believe that we recommend Monday date. Monday the 22nd at 9 a.m. That's what we recommend, but subject to your calendars.
That's a week from Monday.
It's
This coming Monday.
it's this coming Monday.
This coming?
Yeah,
This
this
coming
comes
Mon-
Monday.
Today's the 16th.
Yeah, 6 days.
August
good.
22nd?
Yes, 9 a.m.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm okay with the date.
I'm good.
That dot ball works good.
With the date. Ken, I'm good.
Good.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm scheduled to be out of town, but I'll try to change. Y'all go ahead with it. 9:30 on the 22nd?
9 a.m.
9 o'clock.
Correct, 9 a.m.
Consensus of the board is in agreement with the 9 a.m. on the 22nd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, you got that, Madam Clerk? All right. I do need to ask you one question, Madam Attorney, in regards to the title searches on these in these easement areas.
Yeah.
Title insurance, is there title insurance of any kind applicable to this?
I do not have the benefit of knowing whether property owners have title insurance or not on their property.
No, that's not quite what I'm asking. The town goes and spends money in good faith on a property, building sand on the property. And if the title search, yes or no, whether you did one or didn't do, if all the people that are required to sign to perfect the easement did not sign, is there any kind of title insurance or anything to protect the town?
No, it would be cost prohibitive on a project of this scale, but also the condemnation remedy is a quick taking for 30 days.
So it's a non-issue?
That's a non-issue.
Okay, thanks. All right, are we on number 13?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Freer.
Yeah, the intent of this agenda item is, I'd like to talk about B first. Obtain an independent engineering assessment of the recommendation of the Sewer Advisory Committee. I'd really like to obtain an independent engineering assessment of our current sewer system and any risk analysis and any remedies. So I'd like to modify that because I prefer a independent second opinion to start without being influenced by the P and Z committee's recommendation.
Are you making a motion or?
You just take your
Yeah.
motion.
That's my motion, to obtain an independent engineering assessment of the sewer system, risk analysis, and proposed remedies to those risks.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Discussion.
Any idea, David, as a guess to how much something like that might cost us?
I have no idea. I know that there's a process, and what I'm gathering from you is that you don't want to use the town's current engineer of record.
I was gonna, well, the point, no, I don't want to jump to that conclusion, David.
Okay.
I think we should get I don't know how you want to do it, but a presentation or an understanding of the town's current engineering firm, what their qualifications are to
Well,
specific to our sewer system.
There's a process that, by North Carolina law, that you have to go through in order to select an engineer either for project or of record. That's a request for proposals that you would put out on the street. So, I mean, you have an engineer of record, if you will, already, and the question would be, now, that engineer of record was not involved in any of the work that went into the sewer vulnerability project. They were not involved in that, or their skill set they were not brought in as a consulting engineer on that. So they are familiar with the town sewer system, but they were not involved in any of the planning and zoning board's recommendations. So, it's your decision on whether or not you would like to use them in that capacity of a third-party assessment. Now, if you don't want to use them, then you're required to do a request for an RFP for engineer service, consulting services specific.
But, so my question is, can we as a town understand if they're qualified, what's their expertise? I understand they weren't involved in it, I understand they're familiar with it, but I'd really like to understand their qualifications in doing the work.
Well, I mean, they're already, have been selected previously through that request for proposal process. It's been some time since they were selected, and the board's entirely within its right to select another consultant engineer. I don't know if I answered that or not.
I don't think you had,
I
but.
think what David's trying to say is they were determined to be qualified before during the selection process originally. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So were they determined to be qualified for all of the engineering projects for the town? And if they are qualified, were they, there's a lot of engineering projects in the town, right? So were they,
And they're traditional civil engineering, road, street, sewer, water. I mean, those are the traditional engineering. We have a coastal consulting engineer that's separate and apart and doesn't do that type of civil engineering.
yeah. So that with that said, I think though we need a firm that specializes or is highly qualified to give us an assessment of our particular sewer system, rather than a generalist, if you will, engineering firm.
Including a risk analysis as well as the development of alternatives.
Right.
So what you're saying is that you're desirous of an RFP solicitation?
If that's, yep, you said that's the process. Right. And to address A, I think A falls under, it would be obtaining an underground tank non-destructive inspection services. I think that would be probably a recommendation from this firm, but I think it would, I'd wait on that to see what this specialized firm provides us, what direction they're giving us.
Well, actually, I think non-destructive testing is something that doesn't require an engineer to say, do you need it? By virtue of these tanks being, how old are they, 10 years in service? And we've heard, and I've heard statements that they may only last 8 or some 10 years in the future, which I'm befuddled how you could make a statement like that without non-destructive testing. So to me, that's something I would like to see done so we know the current state of those tanks.
I totally agree, but my point is, that's one example of a lot of, probably numerous things that have to happen in the assessment of the system.
Understand.
That is an assessment of a component of the system.
I understand.
Right.
I'm just going
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the statements that we've heard from our public, from Chris saying that they've already seen metal released from the inner wall. So I just think that's just do it, so we know what we've got. And the only other thing I'll say is that, we're budgeting how much? What's the 2 million? The proposal was for, what, $2.5 million worth of work to be done. So in terms of, I think it is important to get an independent engineering assessment if we're looking at that kind of money, including your risk assessment.
Okay. just a point toward the funding, that $2.5 million was put in the capital plan, and there was no appropriation made for robust engineering services.
Understand.
The budget year that ended, there was money in the professional service or technical services line item to support the sewer vulnerability committee, but there wasn't a separate appropriation made, but y'all could do that supplementally after you.
And tell me if I'm wrong, there is a separate fund dedicated towards the sewer and water.
That's correct. It's the enterprise fund.
Right, okay.
So I think that's a good next step. You know, we've had the vulnerability study, and we need to move forward. So I think that a next good step would be to have an engineering firm come in and give us a second opinion, and then move forward from that point.
Do I understand we're gonna make the recommendations of the sewer committee available to the engineering firm? I don't see a problem with it, but I thought I heard you say something about,
Well,
earlier about not seeing it.
I don't want to predetermine their, I don't want to influence the assessment, to be honest with you. I would expect a blank sheet assessment. I don't want them to, I wouldn't want a consultant to come in and say, okay, this is what the town's P and Z recommends, and we're gonna go from there. No, I don't, that's not the intent, in my
Okay.
opinion, of a second opinion.
Okay, but that agenda item says an assessment of the sewer advisory committee's recommendations.
That's why I don't agree with that,
Okay.
part of the agenda.
For the request for proposals, what is it that you'd like them to do? Would you like them to perform basically a risk analysis of the sewer lift stations susceptible to flooding?
I'll,
I mean,
yeah.
because I got to have some verbiage to do a solicitation. Okay.
Yeah, I can work with you on what my intent is, the individual verbiage, but that's the intent, is that.
Remember now that the study that P and Z did was on more than just flooding.
Right, right.
So if you're just gonna have them look at flooding, they're only gonna look at a piece of what P and Z looked at. So you need to give them the whole scope.
Yep.
Well,
So
and
it's
I know
what
the
you're-
scope was expanded, but we got into, automobile striking, lightning striking. To me, those really went beyond the bounds. I mean, those hazards exist everywhere for any system. I would rather it focus on vulnerability of the lift stations, which would include the state of the components within the lift stations, electrical, structural, corrosion, susceptibility, those types, anything that would impact the function of the lift station. And, the subject to flooding could be, including subject to flooding. I mean, I guess
agree.
we're too close to it now. Seems obvious, but that's what I would propose if they're gonna look at. That way we can limit the work they're doing and not include everything that you mentioned, Ken. You're correct. That's what the P and Z board was directed to look at, and they expanded it, but I think we understand enough.
But they didn't go crazy with expanding it. They added
No,
electrical.
No, I didn't say they did, but as I recall, it did include lightning strikes, damage, which, we're gonna get into ground fault protection, surge protection. I'm not sure, I think we know that. But unless we're gonna construct barriers around the buildings to address a vehicle striking them, I just don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about lifts, to your point, Mr. Town Manager, I think it is lift stations and all the interrelated components that that serve the function
But
of,
didn't they also look at serviceability of the lift stations for future repairs? I mean, they looked at cutting the hole in the roof to be able to take the tank out and replace the tank
well,
in the future.
well, to me,
Is that
those were
something we want them to
solutions.
look at?
Well, do you want to look
I
at
mean-
solutions? Because we're asking to look at
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
an assessment of the
Yeah.
current state.
No, I think if she can read it, I said the assessment and risk analysis and remedies and alternative remedies to address those
The concerns that they identify.
concerns that they identify,
Okay.
correct. That's,
But if we're not gonna give them, we're not gonna give them the report, so we're not, how are we gonna give them the concerns that they identify without giving them, I guess that's where I'm
in my,
having trouble.
so that's
Well,
why I'm looking for.
The report's out there, the report's a public record.
Yeah,
You know, it's out
But-
there.
There, that's why I think we should focus on engineering firms that their expertise is in sewer systems similar to ours. They don't need that report, in my opinion, they should be able to assess it and understand what the vulnerabilities are and the risk, and do a risk analysis right off the bat. And, you know, and what we have to do to mitigate those risks. Because there's some risks that you can solve with just throw money at the problem, right? So there's a balance between whether you want to,
What's an acceptable risk and what's not?
what's an acceptable risk and what's not. So that's why I'd like to focus on the qualifications of the firm, and that's why I asked the original questions of the engineering firm of record. And I think we should focus not on that, but on putting an RFP out for firms that have the expertise in sewer systems that are similar to ours.
So for our benefit and the others here in the room, Mr. Hewitt, do you understand
Did
what
you
we're
get the
asking? Could
original?
you read it
I
back
read
to us?
Yeah.
I have your original motion.
Read it for us,
Can you read it for
please.
us, please?
To obtain an independent engineering assessment of the sewer system risk assessment and propose remedies to the risks.
That sounds good.
Okay, just be cognizant of the fact that you're gonna have to go through a process to select that engineer.
Understood.
You commissioners object to me asking Mr. Clemens if he may have any comment on it?
No.
No, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. That makes a lot of sense. Are you ready to vote?
I don't have one that's gonna be actually, you know, going to anything that you've already agreed on. The idea coming up about that collection thing, you know, that was all part of the vulnerability of the things that we thought that could impact us and take us out of service for a period of time. We didn't try to fancy it up or anything, but we tried to do our best to identify everything that we thought that might, present a problem that we'll be able to handle. We just wanted to shed light on things that hadn't been looked at in the past.
Yeah, and totally understood. I went to most of those meetings. They were fantastic. But just like if I had to spend a lot of money, if my life depended on it and went to a doctor, I'd still want to get a second opinion. Even if I went to a very qualified doctor, I'd go get a second opinion. So it's nothing against any of the work that was done up to this point.
Mr. Clemens, is it your opinion that non-destructive testing of the tanks would be worthwhile or not? Absolutely worthwhile? Okay. Thanks.
Are you ready, guys ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Madam Clerk, unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Freer.
Are we through with number 13?
Yes.
All right, going to number 14. You have any nominations for the alternate member on the P and Z board? You want to discuss it, you want to act on it, or what do you want to do?
You have a voting
I have a form if you would like, but it's one position, so if you'd like to do it out loud, however you want to do it. Or whatever you want.
I'll make if I could, I'll just make a statement about are we gonna fill out the forms that we're doing? Okay.
If the board chooses, if you wanna do it out, I would bring it.
I'd just like to do the phone because I'd like to see all 4 names. We only got 3 of them in our package. There, Heather. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Yeah, the discussion, I'd only make one comment. You know, everybody's highly qualified and appreciate their offer to serve. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, the clerk has rendered her decision. Correct, Madam Clerk?
Not my decision, I tell you.
Make her decision to evaluate the winner. Greg Shue, you are the appointed person, sir. Thank you for offering, and thank all the rest of you that have your names in the pot. I'm sure we'll be looking for your assistance in the near future. All right, town manager's report.
Yes, sir. I only have 2 items tonight. Want to announce that just in time to catch some of the snowbirds flying south, the dock is open. Hopefully, we'll see some reservations be made out there with the boating infrastructure grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that staff has met with the disaster debris contractor 3 weeks ago, I believe it was, in anticipation of not having a hurricane this year. And we've also conducted a regional group work session with the state coordinator for FEMA. So those are two skills that we're hoping that we do not have to employ this hurricane season. One of the things that came out of the meeting with the FEMA regional coordinator, of course, the rules always change, and we want to make sure that we stay on top of the most recent changes to contracting law. That's my report.
Mayor's report's really brief. Mr. Fletcher, I know you control the agenda and the people, how they speak, but I'd make a request that on the sign-up sheet, that you'd have it in 2 parts. One for the agenda items and one for just miscellaneous.
You mean at the end of the meeting?
Both.
So there's 2
If someone in the audience wants to speak to an agenda item, I'd like to have them have one section to sign up.
That was my error. The second, you guys voted at one of the previous meetings that the second public comment period does not need to sign up. So I just didn't catch that. They didn't want to speak on an agenda item, so that was my error. So you only have to sign up for the first public comment.
Okay, so we just recognize people in the audience, is that
For
right?
the second one.
Okay, very good. That concludes my report.
I'll be brief. You know, the new water table increases were effective July, and it caused me to look at our water usage. And one thing I did discover, some of you are probably already doing this, but just for the sake of sharing what I discovered, is that we keep our house at 78 degrees, and the 2 heat pumps generate about 6 gallons of condensate a day. So I just put a bucket underneath those 2 pipes, and I'm using that to offset some of the irrigation. And thank everyone for coming, and we do appreciate your comments and your feedback, especially critical feedback. Thank you.
I'd say the same thing. Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. At the risk of stating the obvious, you saw us struggling with the municipal service district. We understand we need it, but we also understand our limitations of what this board can do, and we wanted to state what those were. So, thank you.
Ms. Eisenhower?
Just thankful that we had a very quiet and peaceful summer. I think the noise ordinance has worked tremendously, And I know our family has been personally thankful for the noise ordinance, and it has worked. And I'm looking forward to a peaceful winter as well.
Mr. Fletcher?
The municipal service district that we talked about, the one thing that didn't get mentioned is that, in fact, it's put together because one part of a town or a municipality gets more benefit than another. In this case, everybody on the island benefits, but in fact, those of us who live on the beach have a significant additional benefit in that if there's a storm and you've just put 80 feet of new sand out there, that's 80 feet of sand that has to get away before we get hit. So washing away beach houses is one thing. Having a beach is fantastic, and everybody on the island enjoys that, but those of us living on the beach enjoy this even more, having the sand on the beach. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to have attached some of the additional tax to the homeowners on the beach, but we're not doing it. But that's why that MSD exists, so that when one group does get significant more benefit, they could be taxed additionally, more so than the others. But our plan was not to do that.
Mr. Kaiser?
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. I, for one, do appreciate all the comments and concerns and questions you raised. And I think that that's a sign of a healthy government. And I want to thank those who volunteered to be on the boards. Thank you. That's it.
All right, public comments on anything you want to talk about? Yes, sir, Mr. Tony.
My name is Tony Marwis. I live at 118 Frigate. I think it's a good thing that you did not include me on these equal work, because after I get through here, you would probably impeach me. There are three things I want to address, and Lou, there are lots of things we disagree with. This is one of them. If you grant Point West a more parking zone, then the people that live on Frigate will come to you and ask for exactly the same thing, because we got exactly the same situation that he does, other than the fact we weren't a private street at one time. The only reason to park on our street is to use our private access that we own. We pay taxes, we have insurance on it, it is ours. So the only reason to park on Frigate is to use that. So if you grant it to Point West, we're gonna be in here the next week to do it again. As John said, any idiot can see that the people who live on the beach receive a greater benefit than I do from the sand on the beach. I don't have a problem with paying my share, but you have eliminated the fact that you could decide that the three of you who live on the beach receive an extra benefit and not have to pay for it. I don't think you should have taken that out. There's three of you that live on the beach, two of you in the zone.
Two.
I agree.
Now there's only one
You've moved now?
today.
Well, see, I can't keep up with everybody moving. So John had a really good point, and I can't understand why you voted against or for that change, John, because it seems to me that everybody knows that if you get an extra 60 feet of sand, you get more benefit than I do. Yes, I get benefit, and I don't know what the percentage might be. Maybe you get 5% more, maybe you only get 1%, but you do in fact get more, and you lost the ability to take care of that. The third thing that I'm gonna talk about, it upsets me highly, is the sewer vulnerability study. We busted our derriere on that. We had extremely qualified people, and y'all have, as far as I'm concerned, completely thrown it away. Why do you ask us to do things if you don't act on the benefit? It would be reasonably easy to get an engineer to review our recommendations and decide whether they're right or there's a better way to do it. But I don't think you need to start redoing it again, because we've already done that. I myself would be reluctant to spend the time to do it again, knowing that you're gonna throw away that work. I sound angry, and I am a little bit, because I don't think you've been right tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Arrowood?
Hey, I'm Marty Arrowood, and I was here in May to ask you guys to help us with Ranger Street, the public parking area that had kind of taken away the homeowner's ability to go to the beach. And I am here tonight because I complained, and I'm here to say thank you. We've had a wonderful summer. The very next day, there was a trash can out there. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. That Saturday, Mr. Hewitt and Ms. Eisenhower met with me, and we walked Ranger Street, and we've kind of become the template down there. We have 5 golf cart designated parking places. We have made the effort in our community to go through and let everybody know over this summer. Mr. McClellan, myself, and Ms. Sprouse have kind of been keeping statistics. We have an average of 4 golf carts parked there a day. One of the rental companies has increased rentals of 2 golf carts usually. And we've had a homeowner to buy a golf cart because there's now a designated place to park golf carts. During July, on any given day, there were 3 or 4 wagons and 4 or 5 bikes in the designated area. And Mr. Hewitt, as we've talked about, he can handle the car problem, you know, parking in the non-designated areas. But as far as the homeowners go, thank you very much. We had a wonderful summer. The place is clean. There've been a couple of incidences where people went into the Roberts house and knocked on the door and asked to go to the bathrooms, but they seem to think that that's just kind of where they live. But as far as we're concerned, thank you. We appreciate it. You've heard our needs, and I just came. I'll bring forth a complaint, but I'll also say thank you in the long run. So we appreciate everything you did. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, I'm Steve Griffin of 1341 Ocean Boulevard West, and I would like to speak to a unique condition on the west end. About half of the properties, about half a mile of coastline, has hundreds of feet of sand, vegetation, and a dune system oceanward of the frontal dune. So this prohibits the homeowners from accessing the dry sand beach